80% of the time, the customer won't actually buy what they tell you that they want. If you sell to customers, you face this hidden 80% rule. All your problems in sales, from beginner to expert, trace back to this rule. And it's all about how people think. But I'm not here to give you a psychology lesson. That's not what you need. What you need is to look past the tip of the iceberg to what's hidden beneath the surface of your customers. I'm talking about what they want to tell you, but can't. So in this video, I'll expose this hidden rule and give you the proven 3-step formula to beat it. Any product, any service, anywhere people buy. And by the way, I'm Joel. I've sold millions in all kinds of industries. Sales is what I know. So everyone's heard the phrase, the customer's always right. But here's the truth. This is the rule. 80% of the time, the customer won't actually buy what they tell you that they want. Now, you have to listen to your customer in order to meet their needs. But how can you do that when they're unknowingly steering you in the wrong direction? And this is what frustrates so many salespeople. This is what makes them think, I'm not cut out for this. But the good news is, it's not about your industry. It's not about your product. It's not even about your sales. It's about people. The 80% rule exists because every customer has 5 things that they need to be sure of before they buy. Number 1, am I actually interested in this? Almost every customer has some kind of interest in what they're asking you about, and that's where the first 20% comes from. But the other 80%, that's what's beneath the surface. And that's why this is called the 80% rule, because customers are only 20% of the way to buying, but they're still gonna say things like, I want this one, I want that one, oh, I'm in love with this. And that's the trap. They sound certain, but all they really have is a little bit of interest, no matter what they say. But if you wanna make the sale, you gotta handle that 80% of what they don't say. You gotta handle, is this the right place to buy from? Can this store, company, website actually deliver on what they promise? You gotta handle, is this the right person to buy from, right? Can this person actually help me? And then you gotta handle, is this the right product? Like, will this product actually meet my needs? And you gotta do this in order too, by the way, because if they're not sure about you or your company, they're never gonna be interested in your product. Because whether you realize it or not, you and your company endorse everything you sell and everything you say. And so if they don't trust you, they're just gonna go buy the product from somebody else. But even if you've checked all the boxes to this point, this next one is the overlooked killer. Am I making the right decision? If I buy this today, will I regret it later? That's buyer's remorse, and it doesn't happen after the sale. It starts before they ever swipe their card. Every single customer comes to you with some level of self-doubt. That's why someone can be in the right place at the right time with the right product for the right price, and they still won't buy. Because this isn't about logic, it's about doubt. Ever made a decision that felt right in the moment, but then you regretted it later? I have, we all have, but one cost me years of my life. And even though I learned from it, the scar is still there. And so the next time I gotta make a choice like that, I'll remember that and hesitate. A lot of people get stuck in that hesitation. They can't move forward. It feels safer to walk away than to risk making the wrong choice. And when you try to sell to somebody who feels like that, you confirm all their doubts and they walk away. And that, more than anything, is what makes salespeople want to give up. But here's the good news. There's a simple, repeatable process to guide your customers through all 5 of these buying needs every time. This process removes doubt, gives clarity, and builds the trust that your customer needs in order to make a decision. And that's exactly what I'm gonna break down next. But before I do, there's one mindset shift that you gotta make beforehand. And if you don't, none of what I'm about to tell you is gonna work. You gotta approach every sale with this in mind. It's possible that you got the perfect solution for your customers, but it's also possible that you don't. Here's what I mean. If a doctor assumed that every patient had the same condition, he could kill somebody. Or how about this? If a lawyer built their entire argument on some wrong assumption, they'd lose the case before they started. And the same principle applies to sales. See, most people can't admit that what they sell might not be the right fit. And that's why before you can use this 3-step formula, you gotta win 3 internal battles. Number 1, you gotta face your ego. You gotta admit that you don't have what it takes to meet every customer's needs. Number 2, you gotta commit to humility, because if whatever you sell doesn't meet your customer's needs, you're gonna have to be able to say so. And number 3, you gotta ask yourself this hard question. Do I really care for my customer? And then answer honestly. Because at the end of the day, you're here to help. And that might mean you lose the sale. But when you show up with this mindset, willing to risk the sale for the sake of the customer, only then will this formula work. So let me break it down. I want you to think of this as a conversation framework. This is the ASK formula. Step 1, acknowledge them. Step 2, stay with them. And step 3, keep digging. So this starts the moment you and your customer start talking, and it doesn't stop. It loops over and over until they're ready to buy. Think of it like climbing a mountain. Every time you loop through the formula, your customer takes another step up the mountain. So step 1, acknowledge them. You're gonna let them know something that lets them know you're listening. And keep it simple. This isn't a script. This is a framework. Think if a friend shares something exciting, how do you naturally respond? You acknowledge them, you engage, you react. Same thing here, even if what they say isn't exciting, even if it's an objection. But remember the rule, 80% of the time, they won't even buy what they tell you that they want. So hear them out, but take it with a grain of salt. Maybe they're right, maybe they're not, but at this stage, you don't have to figure that out. Just listen, acknowledge, and move to the next step. Here it is. Step number 2, stay with them. And this is all about connecting to your customer with one simple statement. Now, whatever they just told you gives you some kind of clue as to what's important to them, but because of the 80% rule, you can't really take it at face value. So you're gonna have to dig a little bit deeper without sounding dismissive or pushy. And that's where staying with them comes in because it bridges the gap between just acknowledging them and asking the next question. You're gonna say something like this. Here's an example. And just so I can help you further, and so I can better understand your needs, just to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. Think patience, connection, you pump the brakes. But to a lot of salespeople, this approach feels counterintuitive. Most try to pull the customer along, convince them, outsmart them, say the right thing. But instead, what I'm saying, you stop them for a second. Because here's what you gotta understand, they're battling the 80% rule just as much as you are. They feel the tension of only being 20% of the way there, and that's uncomfortable, and they're vulnerable. But when you stop the conversation and connect with them, you get back on track. This might feel like you're dodging the question, but you're the salesperson. You got to remember, you got the authority in this conversation. That means you have the authority to pause and ask a question. That's not rude. You're not a crossing guard blocking traffic. You're like a guide making sure they don't get lost. You're not the judge calling for order. You're the counselor helping them uncover the real issue. Acknowledge them, stay with them. But here's the deal. Neither of these are going to bring clarity to your customer. They set up the final step, which is keep digging. And this is where the magic happens. This is where the 80% rule begins to break down one question at a time. Keep digging means asking the questions that bring your customer clarity. Like maybe whatever you sell has 3 different options and they have no idea how to choose. And that's your job, to break it down step by step. It gives them one bite-sized piece of information so they can think, process, and respond to you. Remember the doctor example from earlier? He might have the right medication, but before he writes the prescription, he's gonna run a few tests. Same thing here. Or think about the lawyer. He doesn't just argue his case. He asks questions that expose every detail. And that's exactly what you're doing. You might think you got the perfect solution for your customer, and maybe you do, but first you gotta ask the questions. Not only do you get clear on what they want, but they get clear on what they want. Because this isn't just about them giving you the right information. That's needs-based selling. And honestly, if it were that simple, I could just print out a brochure with all the frequently asked questions on it and just hand it to the customer. But we all know that does nothing. Because the customer doesn't just need information, they need trust. But here's the good news, the ask formula organically builds trust. Every salesperson knows that people buy from people they trust, but you can't make people trust you. You gotta earn it. And it turns out that when you help somebody come to their own conclusion, trust builds organically. Think about it. Imagine you just lost your job, you got no idea what to do next. So you call a friend and you pour everything out. And instead of just telling you what to do with a bunch of advice, they walk through the problem with you and you come to your own conclusion. By the end of that conversation, you're gonna have clarity, you're gonna have confidence, and you will have just built a bunch of trust with that person. You bond with them. And that's exactly what's happening with your customers. Every time you loop this formula, you dismantle another piece of that 80%. And that's what leads to the sale. So let's take a high level view because at this point, it's just a looping conversation between you and your customer. So you gotta ask, how do I keep this thing from dragging out? Because deal fatigue is real. And if you're not careful, you're gonna lose the customer. Eyes gloss over and you lose them. And that's where what I call the clarity loop comes in. It's really simple. You ask a question, your customer responds, but then they hear the response and they refine it a little bit more. That loop brings clarity. Every time you ask a question, that happens. And you gotta be patient because sometimes it can take a long time. It can take a bunch of questions for the customer to just get clear on one simple thing. That's when salespeople try to push, but you can't do that. It's like trying to remember somebody's name, You say what you think, but then when you hear yourself say it, you know that's wrong. So you pause for a sec, you think, maybe you got the first letter and you say it a couple times, and then all of a sudden the right name just erupts and you got it. Well, that's what's happening with your customer. Every time you ask a question and they hear themselves answer, they get a little bit more clear on what they actually want. They adjust it, they refine it, and then boom, all of a sudden they get clarity. And you'll never have deal fatigue so long as your customer is getting clarity. Because clarity is confidence and confidence is trust. But all of what I'm talking about moves the ball down the field, but it doesn't score the goal. When you sense that moment, when the customer has clarity and confidence, you'll know. And that's when you go for the close. Just ask for the sale in simple terms because you really only have 2 options. They're either gonna buy or object. If they buy, good job. If they object, you go back to the formula. Simple. But we gotta go back to the 5 things every customer needs before they buy. Because during this process, some customers are gonna realize they can't actually buy from you. Maybe what they need isn't something you sell. Maybe it doesn't even exist. Maybe you lose the sale. But all is not lost. In fact, you're probably in a better position than what you think. Here's what I mean. You're the one who walked them up the mountain, So you're the one that they trust. Whether you cut them loose or refer them to somebody else, they're still gonna walk away knowing I was in the right place, I was with the right person, and no matter what decision I make, it's gonna be the right one. And the beauty of that is that you get credit for it. That's why I've had customers that didn't buy from me, but they sent me referrals anyway. Some people complain about losing the sale, but I don't, man, because honestly, if the only two types of customers that I leave behind are happy buyers or happy non-buyers that still send me referrals, I'm never gonna be running out of business. But at this point, you can see the 80% rule, why it happens, what it costs you, you know, the mindset shift that it takes to overcome it, and the exact formula, the ask formula that it takes to dismantle it. And that's exactly what I promised you in this video. But I want to give you one bonus tip that's going to tie everything together for you. Because here's the deal. Understanding the strategy is one part of it, but knowing how to say it in the moment is what brings it to life. And that takes some practice. You got to put in the reps. So to help you, I've put together an extensive list of ask formula word tracks. These are phrases that help you build that trust and get the clarity with your customer. These aren't scripts, they're frameworks. So take them, adapt them, make them your own. The link's in the description. This is the same list that I've used to close tens of millions in sales across multiple industries, multiple demographics, multiple regions. And so if you want to refine your approach and take all the guesswork out of what to say next, this is where you start. But in this video right here, I show you exactly what not to say, because everybody does this stuff and they don't even know they're doing it. But these are the sales killers that you never say.